It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday where the sky forgets to shine and the air feels thick even when the windows are open. I was standing by the kitchen sink when she told him. She didn't raise her voice. She just held the test in her hand, gently, like it might shatter if she gripped it too tightly. Her eyes, they were wide, soft, hopeful, like a girl still believing in promises. "I'm pregnant," she said. Just 2 words. But he blinked, like someone had thrown ice water on his face. He didn't smile. He didn't move toward her. Instead, his jaw clenched, sharp, quiet. The kind of quiet that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. "Are you serious right now?" he said. And in that second, I saw it. I saw the light go out in her. She didn't cry, not yet. But her shoulders pulled in like she was trying to hold herself together from the inside. One hand went protectively to her stomach. The other hung by her side, forgotten, the test still in it. He started pacing, not toward her, away. "I can't do this. You knew what I had going on. You knew I wasn't ready for this." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Not defense, not anger, just nothing. And that silence, it screamed louder than anything. He grabbed his keys off the counter, didn't look back. The door slammed, not violently, but finally, like something sacred had just been closed forever. She stood there, frozen. The soft hum of the fridge was the only sound left in the room. Her eyes stayed on the door for a long time. Not in shock, not really. In that kind of stillness where your soul knows it's just been left behind. Then she looked down at the test in her hand. Her fingers trembled. But she didn't drop it. She just whispered, "Okay," like she was trying to convince her heart to stay beating. And I swear, in that moment, the whole room held its breath with her. That was the moment the promise broke. And from the shattered silence, a different kind of strength began to stir. But for now it was just her. A cracked heart, and the soft, hollow sound of her own breath filling the quiet he left behind. The door didn't just close behind him, it stayed closed. For days. I remember the way the light changed in that apartment. It used to be warm, late afternoon sun slipping through the sheer curtains, dancing on the floor. But now it just sat there. Dull, heavy, gray. She didn't turn on the lights. The living room was quiet. Not peaceful. The kind of quiet that feels like something died in it. She walked slowly from the door to the couch, like her body was moving, but her soul was still standing where he'd left her. There were dishes in the sink, unpaid bills stacked crookedly on the table, one slipper under the coffee table, the other missing. It looked like a life someone had walked out of, and she was still trying to live in it. She sat down, not because she was tired, but because she didn't know what else to do. Her hand went to her belly again, the smallest curve, still barely visible. But to her, it was everything now. She closed her eyes, and in that stillness, I saw it all. The questions she didn't ask out loud. How will I do this? What if I can't? Why wasn't I enough? Her phone lit up once, a notification, not his name, just a missed promotion from a food delivery app. She looked at it, didn't touch it, didn't move. There was something about the way she stared out the window after that, like she was waiting for the world to notice that something inside her had cracked, quietly, privately, not broken, not yet, just cracked. And when the sky turned dark and the streetlights flickered on outside, she finally lay down on that old couch, curled on her side, hands around her stomach like she was trying to shield the only part of her that hadn't given up. She didn't cry that night, but her eyes didn't close either. They just stared at nothing, as if she was searching for the pieces of herself in the shadows of a room that used to hold love. Morning came, but it didn't feel like morning. No bird song, no coffee brewing, just the dull thud of footsteps in the hallway, and then the knock. Not soft, not polite, just final. 3 knocks. She sat up slowly on the couch, blinking at the light leaking through the curtains, her body stiff like it hadn't moved all night. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach. Then another knock. Louder. "Miss Adams," a voice called. Male. Cold. The kind of voice that doesn't ask, only tells. She didn't answer, just stood up, smoothing her wrinkled t-shirt with shaking hands. Her legs were still sore. She hadn't eaten much in 2 days. When she opened the door, the landlord didn't even pretend to feel sorry. "You're 2 months behind. I gave you time." He held out a folded notice. "You have 30 minutes. She didn't argue, didn't beg. She just nodded. That's what broke me. No anger, no tears, just surrender. She turned back inside, quietly picking up what little she owned. A small suitcase, a torn backpack, a photo of her parents tucked between two baby socks. She placed them all on the couch, moving slowly, gently, like she was packing away pieces of her old life. Her eyes kept glancing around the apartment, not like she was checking for forgotten things, but like she was trying to say goodbye to memories that no longer fit. The kitchen where she used to cook for two. The mirror where she once tried on dresses he liked. The corner where they'd put the crib, when they still believed in forever. She zipped the suitcase. One last look at the room. Then she closed the door behind her. Softly. The hallway felt colder than it should. She walked down the stairs without speaking to anyone, each step echoing like it didn't belong to her anymore. And when she stepped outside, the wind hit her, sharp and fast. The sky was a dull gray. Rain was coming. You could smell it. She stood there for a second, one hand on the handle of her suitcase, the other protectively covering her belly. No umbrella, no plan, nowhere to go. Just a woman, pregnant, alone, standing at the edge of a life that no longer wanted her. But somehow, she didn't look defeated. She looked quiet, heavy with pain, but still standing. That was the part that stayed with me, the way she stood. It wasn't a hospital, not really. Just a worn-down clinic on the edge of the city. The kind people only go to when they have no one and nothing left. The lights flickered in the hallway. One buzzed like it was tired of being needed. She had walked in alone, holding her belly with both hands, her coat soaked through from the storm outside. Her hair clung to her face. Her eyes got her eyes. They didn't ask for help. They didn't expect kindness. They just asked, please, let this child make it. No one held her hand when the pain came. No one whispered, you're strong or almost there. Just the nurse, silent, tired, moving around the small room, latex gloves snapping, a clock ticking too loudly above the bed. She lay there, trembling, staring up at a ceiling with water stains shaped like broken wings. The contractions came like waves. She gritted her teeth, no screams, just deep, aching groans from somewhere buried in her ribs. I saw her eyes then, wide, wet, locked on nothing. Maybe she was remembering the night he left. Maybe she was imagining the child's face. Or maybe she was praying, not with words, but with everything inside her that hadn't already collapsed. The power cut out once. For 10 long seconds, the room went black. All you could hear was her breathing. Heavy, raw, alive. And in that darkness, I swear, she didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. The lights buzzed back on, dim, yellow, and then a cry. Not hers, a new one, tiny, sharp, like the first sound of something beginning. The nurse didn't smile, just wrapped the baby in an old towel. She handed the child to her without ceremony, like passing a burden. But when the baby touched her chest, her face changed. Not into joy. Not yet. But into stillness. The kind that fills you with something warmer than hope. She didn't say anything. She just looked at that little face, skin against skin, and breathed. Like for the first time in months, the air had come back to her lungs. And then, the smallest smile. Not on her lips, but in her eyes. It was quiet in that room. No balloons, no visitors, no flowers, just her child, and the soft hum of survival. The shelter was quiet after midnight. Not the kind of quiet that soothes you, but the kind that reminds you how far you've fallen. She slept on a thin mattress on the floor, tucked against the farthest wall. No door, no privacy. Just a sheet hung like a curtain, swaying gently with every breath of cold air that slipped through the cracked window. The baby whimpered, then cried. She was already awake. She hadn't really slept. Not when her ribs ached from the concrete underneath. Not when the wind found every hole in the walls. Not when her stomach had been empty since yesterday afternoon. She sat up slowly, cradling the baby close to her chest. He was so small, his cry wasn't loud, it sounded tired, like he already understood life wasn't going to be kind. She rocked him gently, humming something. Not a lullaby, not a song, just a sound that came from deep in her throat. Soft, broken, but steady. Her eyes stayed on the shadows in the corner of the room. Other women slept around her. One snored quietly, another coughed in her sleep, but no one looked, no one asked. Everyone in that room was surviving their own storm. When the baby finally drifted back into a shallow sleep, she laid him down beside her and reached into the small paper bag she'd hidden beneath her coat. One half-eaten piece of bread, cold, stale. She broke off a piece and chewed slowly, holding it in her mouth longer than needed, trying to trick her stomach into thinking it was enough. It wasn't, but she saved the rest. Tomorrow might be worse. And that thought, that maybe tomorrow would be colder, hungrier, harder, it didn't break her, it just made her quieter. She curled around her baby, wrapping him in the one coat she still had. Her fingers ran gently across his forehead, brushing his tiny curls back. "I'm still here," she whispered. Not to him, not to the room, to herself. "I'm still here." Outside, the wind picked up. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. But in that small corner of the shelter, beneath a flickering light, a mother and her child pressed into each other, and into the night, with nothing left to give but presence. And that, somehow, was everything. The next morning came without sunlight, just a dull, gray haze through the high, dusty window. She was sitting by herself at the edge of the dining room, a long metal table, cold under her elbows. Her baby lay wrapped in her coat in a chair beside her, sleeping with tiny, twitching hands. The shelter served oatmeal. Thin, barely sweet, but warm. She ate it slow, not because she wasn't hungry, but because that's what you do when food feels like a privilege. Across the room, chairs scraped the floor. People talked in low voices. No one made eye contact, except one woman. She looked maybe in her 60s. Dark skin, salt and pepper braids pulled into a neat bun. Eyes that had seen hunger before, but still softened when they met pain. She sat down without asking. Didn't smile right away, just looked at her. Not with pity, with recognition. "You're a quiet one," the woman said. Her voice was low, steady, like someone who didn't need to speak often to be heard. She didn't answer. She didn't know how. The woman glanced at the baby, then back at her. "You remind me of someone I used to be," she said softly. Still, no reply. The baby stirred. A soft coo. She picked him up quickly, protectively, like she was used to the world trying to take things from her. But the woman didn't move. Instead, she reached into her worn leather purse and pulled out a business card. Nothing flashy, just a name, a number, and one line beneath it. "Support isn't charity, it's legacy." She slid it across the table. "I run a cleaning service. Small, but real," the woman said. "I don't hire for experience. I hire for grit. You've got it. I can see it." She looked down at the card, didn't touch it. "What's the catch?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a breath. The woman leaned back in her chair and looked her right in the eyes. "No catch, just don't disappear." Then she stood, took her tray, and walked away. That was it. No hugs, no speeches, just a moment, a quiet offering. She stared at that little card for a long time, and when she finally picked it up, her fingers trembled. Not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in weeks. Possibility. She stood outside the building for 5 full minutes before walking in. It was small, a faded sign above the door, "Grace and Daughters Cleaning Services." The windows were clean, but the paint around the frame was peeling. Inside, the lights were soft, and the air smelled faintly of lemon and bleach. She wore the only blouse she had. It was too loose in the shoulders and too short in the sleeves. The pants didn't fit right. She had scrubbed her shoes with a wet cloth that morning, but the cracks still showed. She held her baby in one arm and the card in the other. Her palms were sweaty. When the receptionist glanced up, she hesitated, just long enough for it to sting. "Can I help you?" the girl asked, her eyes flicking quickly to the baby. She handed over the card. "I'm here to see Miss Evelyn." The girl raised a brow, then picked up the phone. After a brief pause, she nodded toward a narrow hallway. "Second door on the left." She walked slowly, each step feeling louder than the last. The hallway was lined with photos, women in uniforms smiling beside mops and buckets. None of them looked like her. When she stepped into the office, Evelyn was already sitting behind the desk. No makeup, simple gold earrings. Calm. She didn't greet her with small talk. "Sit," she said. She did. Evelyn's eyes went straight to the baby. "He won't be a problem," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "I can figure out childcare. I need to work." Her voice cracked at the end, not broken, just thin. Evelyn didn't nod, didn't say yes or no. Just looked at her, long enough to make her want to shrink. "You're tired," Evelyn finally said. "Hungry, probably." She nodded but kept her eyes low. "I don't hire people to rescue them," Evelyn continued. "I hire them to rise." That made her look up. She nodded again, this time slower. "I'll do anything," she said. "Whatever needs cleaning, I'll clean it." Silence. Then Evelyn opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. She placed it on the desk. You start tomorrow, 5 a.m. Uniform is second-hand. You'll learn fast or you won't stay. That's simple. Something in her chest loosened, but she didn't smile. It didn't feel like joy. It felt like oxygen. Thank you, she whispered. As she stood to leave, Evelyn added one more thing. Don't show up late, and don't mistake kindness for weakness. She nodded, clutched her baby close, walked out. And on the way home, as the wind whipped through her too thin coat, she whispered over and over under her breath, I have a job. I have a job. I have a job. It didn't change everything, but it changed something. And right now, that was enough. The sky was still dark when she arrived. Not just early, silent early. The kind where streetlights buzz and the city hasn't stretched its limbs yet. She stood outside the back entrance, arms crossed tight around her chest, breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Her hands were stiff. She hadn't slept. She had spent the night at the shelter again, feeding her baby in the dark and checking the time every hour to make sure she wouldn't be late. Now here she was, at the door of something unfamiliar, dressed in a hand-me-down uniform 2 sizes too big, holding her breath like it was her only possession. A woman opened the door. Mid-40s, impatient eyes, hair pulled back too tightly. You're the new girl? She asked flatly. She nodded. Good. Grab a bucket. We don't babysit here. The tone stung, not because it was mean, but because it reminded her of how invisible she still was. Inside, the air smelled of pine cleaner and mop water. The floors were damp. Voices echoed down the hallway, women shouting over vacuums, laughing, some complaining. No one looked up at her. Her name wasn't spoken. They just called her the one Evelyn sent. She followed directions quietly, scrubbed floors on her knees, washed windows until her arms ached, carried trash bags heavier than her pride. At lunch, the others sat in a circle eating sandwiches. She sat near the door, spooning mashed carrots into her baby's mouth, her own stomach hollow. They laughed at something. She didn't ask what, but even in the silence, she watched, listened. She noticed who took shortcuts, who cleaned twice without being asked, who cursed the work and who respected it. By the end of the shift, her uniform was soaked through at the collar. Her back hurt, her palms were red and raw. Her baby was still quiet, curled asleep beside her makeshift station. Evelyn passed by once, didn't say anything. Just glanced at her bucket, sparkling clean water, not a speck of dirt left, and nodded, barely noticeable. That nod felt like a breath of warmth in a cold house. On her way out, she walked slower than when she came in. Not because she was tired, though she was, but because something had shifted inside her. She had made it through the day. Not gracefully, not triumphantly, but completely. And when she stepped back out into the dusk air, holding her baby close, the sky above her looked different, still gray, still cold. But for the first time, it looked wide. Like maybe there was room in it for her. It started with a cough. Soft, almost delicate. But a mother knows. She had just finished scrubbing a staircase, 3rd floor, corner office. Her knees ached from the angle, her hands smelled of bleach, and her back felt like it would never straighten again. The baby was downstairs, resting in the corner of the break room where she laid him each morning, wrapped in a clean towel on a borrowed cushion. When she came down for her 5-minute break, something felt off. He wasn't sleeping. He was whimpering, tiny, restless sounds that didn't sound like hunger or fussiness. His forehead was warm, too warm, and when she touched his chest, she felt it, fast, shallow. His breathing, like little wings beating too quickly. She froze. The noise of the vacuum in the hallway faded. The lights above her buzzed softly. But inside her chest, panic bloomed, quiet but full, like it had been waiting for a reason to rise. She scooped him up, pressing him to her chest. Her hands shook. Her heart thundered. She whispered his name again and again like a prayer, like a shield. A voice called from the hallway. Back to your station. She turned, eyes wide. I think he's sick, she said, barely able to get the words out. The woman at the door sighed, rolled her eyes. You have 5 minutes. Evelyn doesn't play favorites. She didn't wait. She grabbed her coat, wrapped him tighter, and left through the side door. Out on the street, the air was cold, colder than it had been all week. The baby's tiny face was flushed, eyes half closed. She flagged down a cab with a desperation she hadn't felt in months, arms waving, tears in her throat. The driver hesitated. Her uniform was soaked, her shoes were muddy, The baby was wheezing, but he let her in. At the clinic, she didn't ask questions. She just clutched her child and whispered, "Please help him," over and over as if saying it enough times might turn it into truth. The nurse took him from her arms, and for the first time in weeks, since the eviction, since the shelter, since the night he was born, she felt powerless. Not tired, not strong, just empty. She sat alone in that waiting room, her fingers twitching in her lap, her eyes locked on the door the nurse had disappeared through. The cheap vinyl seat was cold. The air smelled like antiseptic and sadness. And all she could think, over and over, was, what if I already failed him? What if I've done everything I could and it's still not enough? The door creaked open, and just before she looked up, she closed her eyes, because sometimes it's easier to not see what's coming. The nurse stepped out first, then the doctor. Young, kind eyes, holding a clipboard that didn't feel like a threat. "He has a fever," he said gently. "A respiratory infection, but we caught it early. We'll keep him overnight, monitor him. He'll be okay." Those words, "he'll be okay," they didn't hit her like fireworks. They sank, quiet, like stones in a pond, heavy, slow, but soothing. She nodded, too numb to cry, too tired to speak. Her knees nearly gave when she tried to stand. And that's when a voice came from the hallway. "I thought I might find you here." She turned. It was Evelyn, standing there in a dark wool coat, holding her purse close, eyes calm, but not cold. "I called the office," Evelyn said. "They said you ran out. I figured it had to be him." She couldn't say anything. Her throat was tight, not from shame, but from that feeling you get when someone sees you, really sees you, and doesn't look away. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice lower now. "Why didn't you call me?" She swallowed hard. "Didn't want to lose the job." Evelyn shook her head. "I don't hire machines. I hire humans, and humans break sometimes." There was a pause, a long one. Then Evelyn reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a folded envelope, pressed it gently into her hand. "For the hospital bill," she said, "and for whatever comes after." She looked down at the envelope. Her fingers didn't move. She didn't open it. Not yet. She just stared at it, like it might disappear if she blinked. And then Evelyn said something she would remember for the rest of her life. "You're not alone, unless you choose to be." That was the moment. Not the fever, not the clinic, not the fear. That was the moment her chest cracked open in the quietest, most invisible kind of relief. She didn't fall into Evelyn's arms. She didn't sob on the floor. She just held the envelope to her chest, looked through the glass window at her sleeping son, and whispered, "Thank you." To Evelyn, to the world, to whoever still believed in women like her. And as Evelyn walked away, the sound of her heels fading down the hallway, the cold vinyl seat didn't feel so cold anymore. It had been 2 weeks since the clinic. Her son was healing, slower than she hoped, but better. Every morning, she dropped him off at a neighbor's who owed Evelyn a favor. Every evening, she brought him home, wrapped in blankets that smelled like second chances. And every day in between, she worked. Harder than anyone. She didn't complain when given the hardest floors. She didn't flinch when someone called her weak. She scrubbed toilets, lifted trash bags twice her weight, organized supply closets no one cared about. She showed up early, stayed late, asked questions no one thought she was smart enough to ask. She watched, she listened, and when no one was looking, she learned. One afternoon, the team was short. Someone had called out last minute. A client was waiting in an upscale law office. Marble floors, mirrored elevators, the kind of place where her reflection used to scare her. Evelyn handed her the key card. "You know the job," she said simply. No supervisor, no safety net. She took it without hesitation, and she did it, flawlessly. Not just the cleaning, but the prep, the lockup, the notes, the checklist. When she returned, quiet and calm, Evelyn said nothing. Just took the key, looked at her clipboard, and walked away. But the next morning, something was different. She was called into Evelyn's office before her shift. She walked in slowly, unsure, brushing lint from her sleeve with the back of her hand. Evelyn was seated at the desk. No smile, no warning. "Have a seat," she did. "You've been consistent," Evelyn said, folding her hands. "You're quiet, focused, you take the work seriously." A pause. That's rare. She didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened. Evelyn reached into a drawer and pulled out a navy blue badge, different from the others. It had her name on it. Supervisor in training. She stared at it, then at Evelyn. But I've only been here a few months, she whispered. Evelyn nodded. And you've done more in those months than most do in a year. The room was quiet. She took the badge with both hands, like it might shatter if she wasn't gentle. She didn't cry, but her eyes were glassy. Her chest ached, not from sadness this time, but from something she hadn't felt in so long. Worth. As she walked out of that office, badge in hand, the women who once rolled their eyes now looked up. One even moved to the side when she passed. She didn't gloat. She didn't grin. She just kept walking, chin up, step steady. And in that moment, under the cheap ceiling lights of a building most people would never notice, she stepped into something bigger than a title. She stepped into herself. The bathroom was small, just one mirror, dim yellow lighting, and a door that didn't quite close right. She stood in front of the mirror alone. Her shift was over. The building was quiet. The mop bucket was parked in the hallway, gloves tucked in the rim. Her hands still smelled like lemon disinfectant and hard work. But tonight, she didn't rush out. She stayed. She took off the cap. Her hair, pulled tight all day, slowly fell to her shoulders. Loose curls, tired but still soft. She smoothed them with her fingers, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small tube of lipstick. It was old. She had found it in a box from her old life. The label was half scratched off, but the color was still there. A quiet red, not loud, but not afraid either. She hadn't worn it since before the pregnancy, before eviction, before the shelter nights. She uncapped it, paused, and then slowly, carefully, applied it. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. She looked at her reflection, really looked. There were dark circles beneath her eyes, lines around her mouth she hadn't noticed before. But there was something else, too. A stillness, a steadiness. Not the kind of beauty you get from rest or money, but the kind that comes from surviving. Her shoulders straightened. She tilted her head, just slightly, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw not the version of herself that had been broken, but the one who had rebuilt quietly in the background. She whispered almost playfully, "Still here." And then she smiled, small, slow, but true. Outside, her son was waiting in the stroller by the front desk, wrapped in 2 blankets, cheeks round from sleep. She pushed the door open gently, walked out, and took the handles of the stroller like they were made of gold. She didn't feel rich, but she felt real. She walked home under the streetlights, the badge in her pocket. The lipstick still fresh, her shadow long and quiet behind her. And for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel like she was disappearing. She felt seen by herself. The mail usually came late. She didn't expect much. Flyers, overdue notices, maybe a folded coupon from the corner market. But today, there was an envelope. Cream-colored, thick. Her name written neatly in blue ink, not printed. She stood at the threshold of her tiny apartment, holding it in both hands. Her son was asleep in the second-hand crib beside the window. A breeze drifted through the curtains. The afternoon light stretched long across the floor, brushing against his tiny toes. She ran her finger under the flap, slow, careful, and opened it. Inside, a letter, printed on elegant paper, heavy, soft, with a golden seal at the top. She read the first line out loud, just to hear it in the room. "Congratulations, you have been selected as the recipient of the Evelyn M. Grant Foundation's Pathway Scholarship." Her hand went to her mouth, then slowly lowered to her chest. She read the rest in silence. It was real. A program for single mothers, training, mentorship, a small business grant at the end, the chance to build something of her own. At the bottom, Evelyn's signature and a single handwritten note, "Told you I hire people who rise." Her eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. They just shimmered there, like light caught in glass. She looked around the room. It was still small, still cracked in the corners, still filled with mismatched furniture and quiet nights. But something had shifted. She folded the letter gently and pressed it against her chest, then walked to the window, pulled back the curtain, and looked out. The city didn't look so far away anymore. The world didn't feel so unreachable. Behind her, the baby stirred. She turned, walked back, and sat beside his crib. And as she traced his cheek with the back of her finger, she whispered, "We're not surviving anymore. We're starting." Outside, the wind moved softly through the leaves. And in that tiny apartment with nothing but a letter and a sleeping child, a quiet fire began to burn. Not rage, not revenge, becoming.